ahead and wrap that up. Your comments? I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Lloyd Smith. No one likes to revise an essay or speech that's completed. It seems like to be a lot of hard work for really no reward. However, the word revise doesn't really mean rewrite, rather it means to view again, to see from a new vantage point. Lloyd is halfway through on the 4th time around of his Competent Communicator Manual. He decided to take a look at the opportunity to revise and look again at some speeches that he's already done. His theory is that a speech can always be improved. The original version of tonight's speech placed second place in the 09 District 9 Humorous Speech Contest. It really was just the second best speech presented that night, though the best speech didn't get a trophy, but that's another story. Lloyd Smith and the Big John and the Atomic Twinkie.
When the elevator doors slid open, a big guy out in the hallway stuck his hand out at me and said, "Call me Big John." Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, that's how I met my new neighbor on the 5th floor of George Pierce Hall of what was then called Eastern Washington State College in Cheney in the fall of 1966. Now, there isn't any chance that any of you have actually met Big John, but if you've ever lived in group housing, especially a college dormitory, you probably knew somebody a lot like him. Big John was loud, aggressively friendly, and completely oblivious to the notions of privacy and personal property. His worst trait was that he was a food mooch. Whenever he barged into one of our rooms uninvited, if there was anything edible in sight, he would stuff it in his mouth. When he got it down, he would always say exactly the same thing. "Hey, can I have a little taste of that?" Ho, ho, ho. After a couple of weeks, everybody had had their fill of Big John. A couple guys were talking about throwing him off the fire escape, but I thought we might try some remedial education first. After a little thought, I realized I knew what the perfect instructional device was. The Hostess Twinkie, that golden epitome of the American culinary experience. That's because Twinkies are filled with some white goo, which can be replaced by something much more instructional. I even had the perfect tool to do that replacement. When my roommate Gary had his wisdom teeth out, I gave him a big plastic syringe so he could squirt water around the incision so they heal faster. The question is, what should I replace the white goo in the Twinkie with? That was answered a few days later when several of us decided to have dinner at the new Chinese restaurant that had just opened in downtown Cheney. That was my first experience with screaming hot Chinese mustard. The second I tasted that stuff, I knew I had found my Twinkie filling. On the way out of the restaurant, I sort of borrowed a little cup of mustard from our table, and on the way back into the dorm, I bought a Twinkie from the vending machine in the downstairs lounge. Up in our room, Gary locked the door while I got to work. I carefully extracted the white goo from the Twinkie and injected the mustard. Now back then, men were real men and Twinkies were a lot bigger than they are now. I was able to get over 2 tablespoons of mustard inside my Twinkie before it started to bulge. I put it on a napkin on the corner of my desk and Gary opened the door. Sure enough, within about 2 minutes, there was Big John standing in the doorway, his gaze riveted on the Twinkie. 2 quick steps brought him within range, and as he reached for it, I said, "Don't eat that." He just smirked at me, grabbed the Twinkie, and stuffed it whole into his mouth. He began to chew, and for a few seconds, I thought I had failed and nothing was going to happen. Then he stopped chewing. His eyes bulged open, and he began to turn red from the neck up, just as if he were in a cartoon. The mustard had paralyzed his larynx and tongue, and he couldn't spit it out or say anything. He began running in place and looking anxious, and he started to squawk, kind of like a smoke detector with a bad battery. Suddenly, he turned and bolted for the door. Gary and I jumped up to follow him to see the rest of the show. I think he was trying to get to the drinking fountain in the hall, but the toxic Twinkie had disrupted his internal navigation system, and he missed it. He began going down the hall, ricocheting from side to side. George Pierce Hall is a cylinder with student rooms around the outside and the service core with the elevators and laundry and restrooms and whatnot in the middle. So the hall is circular. As he went down the hall, he went from side to side squawking, and people began opening their doors to find out what was happening. The noise got fainter as he disappeared around the bend, and then it got louder as he came out around the other side. His condition had not improved during his circumnavigation of the 5th floor. When he reached the restroom, he shouldered his way inside. For the next several minutes, we could hear one of the sinks running full blast, while Big John made horrible gagging and strangling sounds. When he came out of the restroom, he was quite a sight. His hair was matted and wet. His sweatshirt was sodden and smeared with Twinkie goo, and his face was a horrible zombie greenish gray, except for his lips, which were bright blood red. He still couldn't talk, and when he saw me, he pointed and said, "Oh, God." Gary said, "Hey man, he told you not to eat it." And as the crowd that had gathered in the hall laughed, Big John shouted something which I don't think was complimentary, and stomped off into his room, slamming the door behind him. Big John was a mere shadow of his former self after that evening. Suddenly, at the end of the quarter, he unexpectedly left us. He didn't die, he just moved up to the 11th floor. But by then, he had acquired a new nickname that replaced Big John. After that night, he was the Twinkie.